Nothing drives a wedge in my immersion with a game quite like a game over screen. No matter how deep I am in the lore of Elden Ring, or how long I've been in a flow state in Hades, it all comes to a halt when that wall of text appears and lets me know that I'm effectively playing around with lines of code. And reminds me of how similar a lot of games actually are, fundamentally. Game over screens have been around since nearly the inception of video games. Most infamously used to pad game time, and keep you playing what would be a 3-hour experience for weeks. Not much has changed about how game over screens operate over the generations. But now with the rise of non-combat and creative indie games, we're starting to see them disappear in a small percentage of titles, and that is a trend I would love to see continue. A couple of prime examples of games that started to at least flirt with game over screens were Dead Space and the Arkham series. Although they functioned essentially the same as old school game over screens, Batman's villain monologue screens made you despise those evildoers and come back on the next attempt even more amped to take them down. Similarly, Dead Space's enemy unique death animations at least added some variety to being killed over and over again. But these are more or less still just game over screens. So let's start to explore the more interesting versions that do away with game overs in a more literal way. Let's use Dead Space to segue ourselves into one of my favorite genres, horror games. These games are predicated on scaring you with dangerous enemies, but as soon as your character actually bites the dust, the tension is removed, and the game over screen pops in to remind you you're safe in your room. That enemy you just died to is now less than half as threatening as it was before you were just sliced to bits. And if you end up dying to that enemy again and again, taking you more than a handful of tries to move forward, it can lead to the complete removal of terror and replace it with frustration. This is a common problem with many horror games, but we're starting to see a change in how this genre operates. Some smaller games like Layers of Fear do away with the dying while keeping the anxiety high, and the brilliant Soma offers a safe mode where the creatures no longer kill the player. It could be argued that this is the optimal way to experience the game, as the monsters can be quite frustrating in the normal mode, while safe mode still retains the game's excellent atmosphere, granted with a little less tension. My favorite implication of a no-death horror experience comes from Outer Wilds' brilliant DLC Echoes of the Eye. When you're caught by these ghostly owl-deer hybrids, instead of disposing of you in some wretched way, they blow out your lantern, sending you back to the real world and keeping you alive, but delaying your progress by just a few minutes. But if you want to keep the character death without the loading screens and progress loss, look to the Dark Pictures series and their predecessor, the best one, Until Dawn. They maintain a perfect flow by having no game over screens, even when characters die. This amps up the tension to palpable levels, because each decision you make could result in losing your favorite character for the rest of the game. No going back to a checkpoint and trying again, as the game saves after every decision made. You have to roll with the punches, and this makes every dramatic moment even more chilling, as the results of a failed attempt are much more permanent, and successful choices offer a big sigh of relief. Now, I'm not advocating for removal of game over screens entirely. Dying over and over in Soulsborne games does have its benefits. When I finally conquered Kos on my 25th attempt, the sense of accomplishment was a high that carried me through the rest of the day. But with the rise of less combat-focused games, and unique games, so too rise innovative ways to return you to a checkpoint, or trigger a game over without a jarring cut to black and a loading screen. Stepping away from horror, we have one of the most brilliant examples of this in Cocoon. A game filled in strange environments, mysterious flora, and an esoteric narrative. This game is the epitome of the word alien. I describe the art as friendly H.R. Geiger, while the gameplay involves solving brain-breaking puzzles in its worlds within worlds. It pulls you into its universe, much like the little bug itself is pulled deeper into the layers of worlds with this beautiful animation. No loading times, just a jump, and you're in. So it has you immersed, but how does it keep you there without breaking that barrier? Firstly, the main puzzles of the game don't have combat, so you're safe from game overs there. But during boss fights, where these beautifully horrid monsters chase you around until they get their mitts on you, in lieu of ripping you apart and having a "you died" pop up on the screen, these creatures just yeet you out of the orb you're currently in with another breathtaking animation. A brilliant on-theme way to keep the ball rolling, without interruption. It's easy to point to games without combat avoiding game over screens because they usually don't have fail states. But it's easy to forget that a lot of cozy games with some form of combat avoid the game overs as well. Stardew Valley has you get knocked out and wake up at the entrance after being rescued. Sure, this results in a black screen and your progress in the cave being reset, but it's still an immersive way to do so without the need to explain how the character magically dies and comes back to life. Game over screens aren't necessarily a net negative to the gaming genre, but I do believe they're a product of a bygone era. In the 80s and 90s, when cabinets dominated the market, having a difficult game kill you off and ending in a game over forced you to pop more and more quarters into their product in order to keep playing. 30 years later, we still see that structure in most of our favorite games, but the tides are beginning to change. Indie games add so much creativity to the media and are completely changing the structure of gaming and how we view them. The cozy game revolution has done away with combat pretty much entirely, thus no need for game overs. Or at least have clever ways to sidestep it when combat is included. We'll see what 2025 holds, but if Cocoon is where game overs are headed, I'm excited for the future, keeping me immersed for my entire playthrough. If you have any game overless games you'd like to recommend, please leave them down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.